Hi, this is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a most remarkable sequel to Haydn's String Quartets Opus 33, and particularly Opus 33 number 5, which has the dumbest nickname of, I think, any work by Haydn. The nickname is How Do You Do? It's the How Do You Do Quartet. Why? Because the opening has this little tag that goes ba ba da dum. Then it starts da 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 ba 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 ba. It does the start thing. But that little tidbit sounds like somebody back in the day heard that and thought, how do you do? Hence the stupid nickname, which we will make no further reference to, of Opus 33 number 5 in G major. Now, the Opus 33 quartets were in their way as earth-shattering as Haydn's Opus 20 quartets. These are the works which supposedly, in the ears of many musicologists and critics, established once and for all the Viennese Classical Style. And they did it by injecting into music for the very, very first time, in a way that no one else had ever attempted before, humor. Structural humor which is inherent in the way the music sounds and is played. And this is something Haydn did better than anyone ever has, and it's still underappreciated because most classical musicians have no sense of humor, or if they do have a sense of humor, they're not terribly bright and they don't get the jokes, and it's just a disaster for Opus 33, frankly. There are wonderful, wonderful recordings of the Opus 33 quartets, which are quite beautiful from a string quartet point of view. I mean, just from terms of playing technically, but that are completely humorless. And that's to miss a lot of the point of the music. And some quartets get some of the jokes and some quartets get none of the jokes. And it's a question of taste. And that's what makes this music so incredibly fascinating. One guy who got the joke was Mozart. Mozart heard Opus 33 and they blew him away completely. He had never imagined music could be like that, and as a result of Haydn's Opus 33, he wrote the 6 string quartets dedicated to Haydn, which were epic-making in their own way, of course, being first of all by Mozart, and second of all being mature quartets that followed up on Haydn's revolution in creating the classical style. Now, the Mozarts are bigger and longer, and some would argue deeper and more profound, but that wasn't Haydn's intention in Opus 33. His intention was to deal with humor. He did deeper and more profound in Opus 20, so he'd already been there and done that. And Opus 33 was a different matter entirely. Now, Opus 33 contains the famous joke quartet. Remember that? That's the one with the really funny ending. But that's just one of the many, many jokes that are contained in Opus 33. And at some point, I'm going to do a video just on Opus 33 so I can sort of tell you where all the jokes are and what they are, and show you how lame so many performances are. In fact, we're going to hear one of them here. It's a very good performance of the quartet, but it misses one of its principal jokes. Happily, a lot of Haydn's jokes are simply, as I said, inherent in the music itself. You cannot miss them because the music is the joke. You can't differentiate, but there are some of them that require a little bit of willingness on the part of the players, as you will see. So, let's talk about Opus 33 number 5, shall we? In G major. The second movement is a beautiful minor key aria for the violin. And if you believe that it's serious, think again. Here's the tune. Now, what does that sound to you? Isn't it sappy, excessively sentimental? Shouldn't it weep and wail? Wouldn't you hear that played by some sort of tacky cafe violinist with excessive vibrato, which is how it should be played, but unfortunately is not most of the time. It's played far too tastefully. That is an absolute clinic in emotional excess, in deliberate emotional excess with the purpose of creating humor. And I will tell you how we know that, one reason we know that in a minute, because first I want to talk about the sequel. The sequel is remarkable, absolutely remarkable. The sequel is Franz Krommer's Partita in F major, opus 57. Right? You know it by heart? I'm sure you do. This is it's a wind octet. That's what these partitas are. And they're really small wind symphonies, and you really should hear them because Krommer was a fantastic composer. His dates were 1759 to 1831. He was almost exactly contemporary with Beethoven. He was a fantastic chamber musician. He wrote mostly string quartets, more than Haydn did, although we're only listening these days to his wind music, because that's also so marvelous, and wind music was a Czech specialty, and Krommer was Czech. But I'm going to play you a bit of the Adagio from his wind partita in F major, opus 57, performed here by the Budapest Wind Ensemble. Listen to this. Sound familiar? Of course it's familiar. He stole the tune from Haydn's Opus 33, number 5. And it's wonderful to compare the differences between the two, because listening to Krommer, we know Haydn was having a joke at the listener's expense because Krommer got the joke. Now, a violin can do humor, as I said, in a lot of ways, with excessive vibrato and sappy singing ensemble. It's a lot harder for a wind octet and a solo oboe in particular. So Krommer writes quite differently. Haydn's movement begins straight off with the violin theme. The Krommer begins with a dark, gloomy, incredibly serious minute-long introduction based on entirely different material. It sounds absolutely like the crack of doom. I'm not going to play it for you, but take my word for it. And the reason, of course, is because he's not able to engage with the instant timbral humor of which the violin is capable. So he has to set it up. And he sets it up with this very, very tragic introduction. And then the tune comes in. And the tune sounds funny, not so much because of the tone of the oboe, as much as the accompaniment. The bassoon going bloop, 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 bloop. I mean, woodwinds are naturally comic. It's not hard to make woodwinds sound comic. And so when you hear this tune played by the oboe, and then listen to the way the oboe embellishes the tune, it begins to sound more and more humorous as it goes, and we begin to suspect that maybe Mr. Krommer, courtesy of Mr. Haydn, is pulling our leg. And this is one of those marvelous, marvelous musical relationships or borrowings or plagiarisms or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't make any difference. It's composers aware of the style in which they're working and able to project that in the medium in which they're expressing that style. And that's why I think this piece is just absolutely wonderful. Krommer's, wind partitas generally are wonderful. And this particular relationship, which as far as I know, no one has pointed out before, I wrote a paper about it actually, fascinates me so much. But how do we know that Haydn wasn't serious additionally? Well, let me play you the ending of the movement. Listen to this. Now that's the version that I was playing all along. This is the Kodály Quartet on Naxos, which is a very, very good cycle. It's a very fine cycle of the complete Haydn quartets. They're an excellent group. But that ending, it's so serious. It's subtle. It's touching, isn't it? That's not what Haydn wrote. It's not. I'm telling you it's not. Here, listen to the opus quartet on Ars Musici play on period instruments, the way Haydn wrote it. Now that's a difference, isn't it? Because the ending is bum ba da 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 dum blum blum, and again the joke is in the timbre. It's in the loud pizzicato. Ba da dum ba da dum ba da dum wah plonk. That's the ending, and that's how you know that the whole thing was just a send-up, just a joke. The Kodály Quartet does not get that joke. No question about it. The opus Quartet does get that joke. But here's what's really kind of amazing for me about the whole thing, and that's that if you look at the score, and I have here the Henley or text edition, right here, look at the way Haydn wrote it. You see that? Where my finger is, my middle finger? I should not use my middle finger, right? You see, it's ba-da-dum, 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 wah, boom, and it's marked forte. There is no question what Haydn wanted. And Haydn's use of dynamics in his string quartets is very abstemious. He's very sparing in expressive and dynamic markings in these works because it's solo music, and he knew that the soloists would either get the point and know what to do, or there was no point in telling them. Of course, later, in his later works, he became far more particular in indicating specifics. And in fact, in these quartets, Opus 33, in the scherzo, which is one of the reasons they're all called the scherzi quartets, the joke quartets, all six of them, because Haydn substitutes a scherzo instead of the minuet. The trio of the minuet is supposed to be played with lots of portamento, that is glissandi between the notes. Dum, and Haydn actually indicates the fingerings and writes in the slides, like for the first time in musical history, because he wants to make sure that they get the joke. And that's what he did here. All he had to do was write forte, and you can't miss the joke. 99.9% of performances that I've ever heard of these quartets miss the joke. They go back to piano because quartet players are terribly, terribly serious people, and string quartets are terribly, terribly serious business, and they have to be played seriously, and Haydn couldn't possibly have meant that he wanted this incredibly sentimental, sappy, excessively emotional aria to end with a dismissive plonk. Well, that's exactly what he did. That's exactly what he wrote. And Kromer, in my sequel, reimagines this joke entirely in terms of wind sonority, because the joke is timbral, right? The joke is, it's not playing out of tune, it's not the wrong notes, it's the sound of the instrument. And this was Haydn's great discovery, that you could create humor in music simply by using sound and texture. And this was something that so few composers after that realized. I mean, Mahler understood it. Berlioz understood it. Certain composers understood that there could be humor in sound as applied to melody. But most of them didn't get it at all. And most performers still don't get it, and most listeners, I don't think it occurs to them. But when you listen to Haydn's quartets, specifically the Opus 33 quartets, you see constantly how he's playing with sound and texture to create the emotional expression that he wants. And that, my friends, is one of the most revolutionary discoveries in the history of music and one of the all-time great historical moments. We're talking the 1880s, the early 1880s, when Opus 33 came out, and they are extraordinary for just that reason. And to hear Krummer do it, he doesn't do the joke at the end. You can't do what Haydn wants to do with woodwinds. So he doesn't. He's a smart composer who understood exactly what Haydn was doing. And so when he stole this tune, he reimagined it completely in his own way. And this is one of those comparisons that has me just sitting in awe of what real genius can do. And what a thrill it is to finally understand it. I mean, it's not simple. It's not obvious. I understand that because we don't think about music in musical terms. We think about music in relational terms. We think of it in pictorial terms. It sounds like something else. It sounds like an emotion. It sounds happy. It sounds sad. It sounds like a train. It sounds like a bird. It sounds like and a lot of Haydn's music is thought of in that way. And so when you come to the idea of what the music is almost, substantively as a sound, how can a sound be funny? Just a sound. Well, we know certain sounds can be funny. Farting and squeaking and screeching, those things can be funny. But there are subtleties. There's slapstick humor, and then there's wit. There's more subtle humor. And that's what Haydn understood. And that's what he put into his Opus 33 string quartets. And that's what Krummer understood. And hopefully that's now what we all understand. And it's what makes this music so marvelous and what makes the Krummer sequel such an amazing thing. Of course, Mozart understood it too. And you find it in a lot of his subsequent music from the 1880s, especially the operas, where he began to really understand, to associate instrumental timbre with emotion, feelings, certain states of mind, and the world of music has just become a bigger and broader thing, thanks to Haydn's Opus 33 and this wonderful sequel by Franz Krummer. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me. Enjoy.